met me before. Okay, my name's Kelly Moat. I'm Programme Lead for Accessibility here at Jisc. Always great to see lots of new names as well as familiar ones. So thanks for coming along. And let's also have a hello from Laura as well, who's our
Hello, good to be back. Good to see you all. Nice of you to come on your Wednesday lunch hour. Thank you.
Hmm. Yeah, so this is the first drop-in of the new academic year. We don't usually do one in September because everybody's rushing around getting students in the door and things. So we're like, we'll leave you to October, we'll start again. So it's the first one. So if you've not been before, it's usually the first Wednesday lunchtime of the month. And today we've got two guest presenters, but we're looking at an absolutely fascinating theme, which is Braille in further and higher education. I am like borderline obsessed with Braille. I absolutely love it. I started out my career in Braille transcription in the school sector, so I'm a big fan of Braille. But I know that it's something because it's seen as pretty specialist and sometimes a bit of a mystery, and particularly in further and higher education, there can be maybe a bit of confusion or anxiety around how to access Braille, when to use it, what's it all about. So we've got two presenters today. Elizabeth McCann from the Scottish Sensory Centre, which is housed kind of within the University of Edinburgh, which is where I am, directly in front of Edinburgh Castle, as you can see. um, and then that's going to be followed by Lillian Joy from the University of York, who's going to join us and talk about her experiences. So we've got a good squad of people arriving. I'm sure we'll have a few more trickling in. But to get things going, I'm going to hand over to Elizabeth to give us some background and tell us about the kinds of support as well that's offered from the Scottish Sensory Centre. So, Elizabeth, over to you.
Thanks so much, Kelly, and thanks for inviting me along today. So I've got a little presentation, but please feel free, anybody who would like to interrupt, challenge me. I love a challenge. On anything that I say, I'm more than happy for that to happen as well. I'm very impressed, Kelly. I love your background. I'm surprised there's not any buses just going past you. But I'm glad that there aren't. Let me just share my screen here. There we go. And let's hope this works. Yay, it does. Excellent. So hope you can all see that. So my toolbar is just now become a little bar, so I can't see people, but please feel free to ask me anything. So I am Elizabeth McCann. I'm a qualified teacher of visual impairments. I used to support children and young people in different parts of Scotland and indeed Canada as well, from really birth to 18. And I think probably we have a few people here from other parts of the United Kingdom. It's one of the things that makes Scotland unique. We are different. In that teachers of visual impairment only support children and young people up to the age of 18, whereas in the rest of the UK it is up to 25. Unless, of course, you're in Northern Ireland and they're like us in Scotland. So yes, and now I work as teaching fellow in visual impairment at the University of Edinburgh. So I teach the teachers who want to be qualified teachers of visual impairment. And I also work at the Scottish Sensory Centre, which provides professional learning for teachers and for others as well. Here we go. So what am I going to talk about? So it's really about how do students access Braille, so students that are attending further and higher education. I'm going to do a little bit on myth busting as well. And again, if you want to challenge me on any of these, then more than happy for that to happen too. And then a little bit about what the Scottish Sensory Centre is doing to support and promote the teaching and learning and indeed the use of Braille. So when children are quite young, they would start to learn Braille on this device on the left, the Perkins Braille Writer, invented in 1951 at Perkins School for the Blind in the United States. And it's an expensive piece of kit, but it is really, we often call it the equivalent of the pencil and paper to the sighted young person. It's a real workhorse. It's incredibly robust. It's made of metal. You do not want to drop it on your toe because it is incredibly heavy. And so that is Perkins Brailler. Whoops, I didn't really want to do that. There we go, move that back. Oh, done it again. So I've opened the chat just to see if anybody's got anything. There we go, I've closed it now. So that's the first thing that children and young people are introduced to when they start to learn Braille. As they get a little bit older, they might move on to what has been called the personal digital assistant, or is more commonly known as a Braille note taker. We don't really advocate children starting on a device like this because you can see that sort of light grey line on the top of the Braille note taker, and these are the pins that come up with the Braille. And we wouldn't really say to children, you can have a book, but you can only have 1 line of text that contains 40 characters at a time, or actually I think it's 32 on a Braille note taker. So it's not very good for learning about orientation of a page and spatial concepts. And what this personal digital assistant does, this note taker, is basically as a whole computer in that little box. And it's about the size of an A5 piece of paper. You can create Word documents on it. You can read documents. You can read whole books on it. You can access the internet. You can access email. There's a clock. There's a radio function. You can get books in different formats, including DAISY format. It does so many things. I've probably missed out a whole number of things that it does. These note takers have changed over the years. You can now download apps from the Google Play Store and so on. Not so much Apple, but definitely more Android devices or Android apps. So this device can do many, many things. And indeed, a number of years ago, I worked with a young man who I later bumped into at a conference. He was now at university and was using his note taker in the university. And he liked his note taker because when he opened a document to take his notes in a lecture, he could very quickly, at the end, the document was already saved because of the way the note taker worked, switch it off and be ready to move on to the next class with his peers. And that was what he really preferred over using a laptop where you have to shut it down and so on and save your work and store it somewhere. That was kind of taken away from him. Didn't need to do that with the note taker. So they're a small piece of kit. They're incredibly expensive, but they do many things. They have some disadvantages in terms of the fact that they're not so good at accessing the internet. But they are often used in schools, and many young people who will come to university will have a lot of experience of using the note taker. On the right, I've got a refreshable Braille display. Now this is linked to a laptop, or it can be linked to your phone or to a tablet. And basically whatever appears on your screen on your laptop will appear in Braille on your Braille display. Now, the one in the picture here has only got 14 cells. It's very, very small. You can get larger ones with 40 cells, which are quite portable. And then you have an 80 cell one as well. There are other sizes too, but 80 cells is, pretty large. That would be somebody who would be using a Braille display at work, and the Braille display would be fixed in place. It's very, very long because obviously the more cells you've got, the longer the piece of equipment has to be. It's not really portable. So your Braille display is driven by a speech program that you would have on your computer. The most common one is JAWS. So that is a screen reader, and it reads everything on the screen. And it's a screen reader that drives the Braille display. Some young people use other screen readers, such as NVDA, non-visual display access, which is a free screen reader. So the price of the Braille display varies, and it's my experience, certainly working in Scotland, just because of prices, that it's very rare for a young person to have a note taker and a refreshable Braille display provided by education in 40 cells. But what you can do is you can take your Braille note taker and pair it up with your laptop as well. And so it becomes like a refreshable Braille display. But there are advantages to having a separate device that is just the refreshable Braille display on its own. Certainly, working at the university, and we've had a couple of students who have come to the MSc Inclusive Education programme who have been Braille users, and they've been international students. And generally speaking, I've found that the international students will come with a laptop and a Braille display rather than with a note taker. And I'd be quite interested to know from you if you find that students who are from the UK are more likely to have note takers than Braille displays. I'm quite interested to know what your views are on that. But what these devices are doing is that they're giving access to the student to Braille for learning, because that is very important. And I'll talk about a little bit more about that in the next, when I move on to myth busting. Now, yeah, the next slide here. I've put this in because I'm not sure how many people are aware of this. The slate and stylus. This is a very, very cheap and quick way to create Braille. The picture here shows a yellow slate, and it's made of plastic. You can get ones that are made of metal. This one has 4 lines. You can get much larger ones that will cover almost a full page, and you can get ones that are smaller that will just be a line of Braille, and then you keep having to move the slate down. So it attaches really to the paper. You put your paper in between. It opens a bit like a book, I should say. Put the paper between the 2 parts, press it down, and that stops it from moving. And then you take your stylus, which looks like a needle with a handle, and then you sort of punch in your Braille into these little cells. On a slate and stylus, you're writing from right to left, and your dots are written, the dot formation is backwards. So for example, in Braille, A is dot 1, but on a stylus, it's dot 4, so you're writing a mirror image. In the UK, or certainly in Scotland, we tend not to teach the slate and stylus just because it's difficult enough for children to learn Braille without actually having to teach it backwards. I'm so saying I actually work with a pupil at the moment who's discovered the slate and stylus through someone else, and she's got one and she loves it. It's good for taking down brief notes, and certainly we had a student from China who didn't have a Perkins Brailler but had a slate and stylus. So she often used that, not in class, but just to take notes in her own time. Also very helpful, you know, if you're speaking to someone on the telephone and you've got to take down a telephone number, it's very good for something like that. But just be aware that many of your students, particularly if they're not UK students, may have access to slate and stylus and might be using that as well, but perhaps not in university. Kind of blows your mind when you think about all the different combinations of dots that learners have actually learned how to write backwards as well. So a few myths about Braille that I often hear. First of all, that Braille is old-fashioned. Well, as many of you might know, we just celebrated the 200th anniversary of Braille, but my goodness, print is much older than that. And the great thing about Braille is that there are new inventions coming all the time. And the most recent one is Page Connect. And this was invented by a group of students who are engineering students at Imperial College London. And the Page Connect fits on the base of your Perkins Brailler that I showed you back a couple of slides ago. And it connects to a laptop by Bluetooth, and it allows, if you go onto the Page Connect web page, if you Braille on your Perkins Brailler, the text comes up in print on the laptop. It's shown at an event that I hosted last November, year past November. And when people saw it, they gasped. because this is just such a huge step forward, particularly in school for children who are learning Braille, that allows their class teacher, their peers to understand what is being written without having someone who's got specialist knowledge of Braille being present in the class. And I think there are a lot of students who are often set within university and projects to do around accessibility, and that Braille is chosen. And certainly I know that I've been asked to look at a few things that students in other parts of Edinburgh University have created. And that's super to think that people are really interested in Braille, people who perhaps have no interest in Braille. So don't think it's old-fashioned. I think that there's a lot of people that are interested and moving it forward and to make it even more accessible. Braille is difficult to produce. Now, I'm really ashamed to say that this did appear on a university's website. I will not say which one. But that actually is untrue. I can tell you, but for me, it's actually very easy to produce. Yes, we need some specialist equipment, and that can be expensive. And if you've not had training, then that is a challenge. And perhaps that's one of the reasons that you've come along today. But even if it was true that Braille is difficult to produce, does that mean that we really just shouldn't do it? And what message does that give to our students that are saying, well, it's just far too difficult, we're not going to do it? Because many of our students have had to overcome many obstacles to reach where they are today. It's really not such a great look if we're saying it's difficult to produce. We can try and we do our best, I hope. And another thing that I hear is that technology has replaced Braille. I don't think that's true either. I think technology has enhanced Braille. And if you look at these devices that I've just shown you, the Braille note takers and the refreshable Braille displays, they have allowed learners to consume what has been written in different ways. And if we think about our students who don't have a visual impairment, they consume written materials in books, hard paper books, on their phone, on their laptop, on a tablet. And we are just now giving those same opportunities to our learners who need Braille to consume the text materials in ways that the technology is enhancing. And the final one, which I think is just said just sometimes a little bit too often, well, I'm sorry, I don't have this for you in a format that's accessible. You can just listen. But listening is not literacy. And I was lucky enough to be in Jakarta last year, where I spoke to a lady who was blind and had done a lot of her higher education in Australia. And she'd come back to Jakarta, which is where she was from, and told me, we are producing young people who are basically illiterate. The technology that I have shown you in places like Indonesia is incredibly expensive, more expensive than it is here in the UK. And so young people just don't have access to these devices, nor indeed do they often have access to a Perkins Brailler, but they do have access to screen readers, but not with refreshable Braille displays attached. So young people are listening. They're not learning literacy. So it means that they don't understand how words are spelt. They lose a bit of information on grammar. And I often say to people, yes, listening is another way of consuming the written word of print and text. And it's fine as a mixed economy, if you like, with hard Braille as well, and technologically produced Braille technology. But literacy is not listening, so it can't ever be used on its own, because at some point, young people are going to have to produce work. Now, again, you can do that just through a keyboard and screen reader, but your spelling is going to be severely affected. And every subject has got a technical language that needs to be learned, and you need to learn how to spell it, and you need to learn about punctuation as well. So I'm going to just run on very quickly and say, what's the SSC doing to help? Well, we are running free events. We've run one, we're running another one quite soon to promote Braille and accessible formats. we've got a page on our website back from 2023 where learners have discussed which note takers they're using and why they're using them. And this is helpful for teachers. It can be helpful for others to know, well, there's a big market, well, it's not a big market, that's not quite true, but there is a market out there with different companies producing different note takers. Which is the best note taker for me? So we've got some secondary pupils who are explaining what they use and why they like the note taker that they do use. We at the Scottish Sensory Centre run biannual meetings for transcribers who create work in Braille. In fact, that's just where I have come from this morning. We also, if you are interested in learning Braille, we have a distance learning course that is actually validated by Scottish Qualifications Authority, where you can learn Braille. You get the materials sent to you. It's obviously a cost for this. And then you submit staged assessments and get feedback from our Braille tutor. And then you sit an exam. So that can be helpful as well. We've also got, which is new for this year, we have got, we were able to purchase a note taker and a refreshable Braille display. So I'm at the moment creating some lessons to put onto the SSC's web pages on how to teach using NVDA, which is speech software, but with a screen reader, which will drive a Braille display. So I am delivering some lessons on that, and also about how to use a Braille Sense 6 note taker. I will, in time, hopefully get a Braille Note Touch Plus from another company, and be doing something similar for that, because each one has got different keystrokes. So these are the sorts of things that we are trying to do to help teachers make sure that when learners that they are supporting within school reach college or university with the skills that will allow them to be ready to access materials produced in universities. And I hope that that's working well. And it's always good to get feedback from universities to say what they're finding with where the skills are that may be lacking when students arrive in first year, whether that be college or university. So what can we do to make sure that these skills are being taught so that learners are equipped and ready to start when they come to you? So that's really everything that I said. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can just double check and see if anything's in the chat and anybody's got any questions.
Thanks, Elizabeth. That was great. I loved that. Oh, you get applause there across the screen. Yeah, and I'm sure. Yeah, there's a few bits of discussion sort of picking up there. As well. I don't know if you want to, it's really up to you whether you want to address any questions just now or wait until we'll have like Lillian's part and then maybe consider them all together. Any preference?
Speech recognition instead of typing. That's an interesting one. Yeah, well, I'm just going to address that quite quickly if you don't mind.
Yes, please do. Yeah.
So speech recognition has to be incredibly accurate if you've got no vision, because if you're speaking and it comes up with the wrong word, then, and speech recognition and listening is quite difficult. So really, we always teach our young people how to touch type because their fingers work well. And, there's no reason why they can't type. Obviously, if it's maths is much more difficult, but then it's really not going to pick up a lot of maths either. And maths on any kind of display that's visual is challenging. So no, we would always use typing is the way. We also think about that is a good skill. I mean, learners who don't have a visual impairment learn to type. And if you think about the world of work, we don't want to really give them any more programs that they need to deal with, slow down their computer even further. So yeah, no, typing is the way, I'm afraid.
Yeah. I think there can be, I know it's something I mean, I think with the speech, just from my own experience in further and higher education, using speech input for someone who's blind is kind of it has to be this sort of not really an alternative way to do things because you see it's very complex because you need to, I'm not sure if you still do, but you used to need a kind of bridging software to make it work with, was it called Jawbone, to make it work with JAWS? And as you say, it adds a huge layer of complexity to things. So yeah, it's quite tricky. Yeah, always this is sort of the least kind of technological complexity is always the best, I think. So that's great. But we'll have more questions after Lillian's. JC, yeah, that's right. Maybe I'm sure there was one called Jawbone at one point. That's maybe because I'm just ancient. I know. I just thought it was a funny name.
Yeah.
Yeah, JC was one. But anyway, okay, great questions. What we're going to do now, we're going to have more time for questions in a moment. But we're going to hop on the train from Edinburgh Waverley Station and go down the East Coast main line to York, University of York, where Lillian is. And so Lillian's going to give us a perspective of someone who's working in higher education who has got to grips with Braille and share some of her experiences. And Laura's got some questions as well to kind of kick off with. And Lillian will share some images as well. So
Yeah.
let's go for it.
Yeah, so I'm going to kick off by asking you, Lillian, what led you to learn Braille?
Yeah, so it's not an everyday thing for all of us in HE to encounter or to even be tempted to learn. But as a learning technologist supporting our disabled students at the uni, I was exploring accessible documents, and I was working with a blind student who was in the maths department, and it just blew my mind how she was even trying to do this. And I knew so little. I didn't know anything about the equipment she was using, and I'm a learning technologist. I didn't know how anything worked with any of it. I didn't understand how she was going to type it and get it back, and then the maths had an added complexity. So I think I was driven by the fact that I know nothing. That's the driver. But even then, with that first student, she was so competent in Braille and her equipment, I saw no need to learn Braille. So for the last few years, I've just been working in accessible maths. And then 2 years ago, the learner I supported had only started learning Braille when she was a teenager. So she didn't lose her sight until teenage years. So she wasn't confident with Braille. And she would be going, "What does this say?" And I'd be going, "I don't know."
Oh, no.
And that was enough to make me get that urge to try and learn a little bit to help her as much as I could. So yeah, that just started me off, as simple as that. And she would show me some of her equipment, including the Braille slate that Elizabeth mentioned. I will just share screen and show you the Braille slate that I've got. That one. So mine is a green Braille slate. It's multiple lines because I know the difference between, continually being able to create Braille and having to move the paper along. It's quite tiring. And as Elizabeth said, normally it's like a gatefold. You'd clamp the paper underneath. But because of what I was doing with this tactile resource, I had it on top. So I cheated a little bit. But yeah, it was purely the student and the way they needed support that drove my interest, really. Yeah.
Great. And so how did you actually get started with it?
So I hear what Elizabeth's saying, but for those of us who aren't ready to commit to an actual course, if you're curious, and I highly encourage everybody to be curious about Braille. I think people are naturally curious about sign language, but you can be naturally curious about Braille and learn Braille or make a start on learning Braille. I started by looking on the web for everything that I could, and I settled on using this Braille Academy app. Please do read its privacy policy first before you commit to. Don't just take my recommendations, okay? Read the privacy policy and make sure you're willing to, I won't say they steal your data or anything like that, but I don't know. But I've been using this. It's got really high ratings. And in a weekend, you can learn the basic alphabets and start practicing some punctuation and numbers, literally in a weekend. So very, very good for your brain training. If you're doing any brain training thing, you might as well learn Braille. That's what I recommend.
Yeah.
And then I've moved on to another one, which is like when you start learning Braille and you can recognize letters, you soon want to be able to practice it by reading, but it's like, where do you go to find Braille you can read? Because public Braille can be full of contractions, etc., short forms of Braille words, of English words. So I moved on to another app called Braille Decoded. I have written all this up, so we'll share the links later. And that allows me to practice much more. I love this. It's like a game. Look, I've got 1,415 points at the moment.
Oh, that's me sparked.
Such good fun.
Yeah. So can you type Braille with a normal keyboard?
So yeah, I think when I've been learning Braille, one of the first things I did was find the UEB online course. And I think uebonline.org is a very, very good site to go to, as well as obviously using Scottish Sensory Centre. But for an online, no commitment approach, UEB Online was great. So I started the lessons. Yes, you can type, Braille is normally using these like keys, and you can use the SDF JKL keys as a simulation for the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dots. And UB Online teaches you how to do that. So you can practice typing and reading exercises on UEB Online. And I've already completed my, I think it's called Module 1, and I got my certificate. You pay for your certificate. So exciting. And I'm working on my Module 2, and then I'll be working on the maths after that. So yeah, you can type Braille with a normal keyboard, to simulate, if you like, a Perkins Brailler. Yeah.
Great. So if you don't know the Braille, can you look it up somehow?
So there are very good like quick reference guides that you can use. This is the Hadley one. There's another one that I use, which is a UEB by Aroga. And again, it's linked in a post that I've written. But as you can see, this requires, it's a reference chart which lists all the Braille codes, and you have to have sight to see it in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So when my student was kind of going, I don't know what these characters are, because in maths, it's just like you have no way of knowing what they are. It can take 3 or 4 cells to be, I don't know, maybe it's a bold Greek letter alpha. And so it might take a few cells to indicate all of that. And you're kind of like, if you've not come across something before, like a derivative, a differentiation, a matrix symbol, you're like, what is this? Obviously, you can listen to it, but that doesn't tell you how many Braille cells it is. You have to kind of guess at it. And to learn Braille while you're learning the maths, it's like you're learning it's like me trying to teach you higher education maths in Chinese. It's next to impossible to do it all at once. So I wish there was a way, and I did ask Elizabeth, didn't I, at the last session up in November, is there a way someone can type 456 45 and get told what it is, what it means? I don't think there's such a thing yet. I might tap into Matt Deeprose. Is another project. Matt's a really good guy to know.
Yeah, we'll just give him lots of projects to go. Matt, help us with this. So you were talking about maths there. What's I'm assuming there's more than one, but what are the added challenges of using maths and Braille?
Yeah, on that point, because we couldn't look up these things easily, I was trying to see if AI, everyone's going, AI is really good. I was like, oh, hey, maybe we can just Google search and use AI.
Yeah.
I've got an image here of a fail. This is where AI can't do Braille. Partly
Yep.
because the Braille is not a regular enough pattern as well.
Mhm.
There's no logic to the pattern. So it will literally give you something totally, totally wrong. So please don't believe anything that Google says about, if you say, what are Braille dots 456, you may get a right answer, you may get a wrong answer. This is totally wrong. So please don't believe anything that Google or AI says about Braille. But in terms of the maths, I guess it's the fact that it's so difficult to learn the new symbols that you're coming across, right? If you've never come across it before. My student was also saying, what does kappa look like? Or what does, let's say it was a H bar or an X triple dot. These are all mathematical terms they're having to learn. And she's like, she thought she still has to visualize it in her head to hold the equation in her head. And she was thinking of X triple dot as X followed by 3 dots in a row, but it's not. It's X with 3 dots above it as a symbol. And same
Okay.
with H bar is how you say it, but it's actually just one character with a line across the ascender. If you've never come across it visually, you've got no way of knowing what that looks like. So I made her tactile references with the shapes of the Greek letters and explained what some of these symbols look like, because we can take it for granted when we're sighted, but it's a real challenge trying to learn the maths and learn the Braille and try to visualize what these equations look like in your head when you've never seen it before.
Yeah.
Real
Yeah.
challenge.
Definitely. So speaking of challenges, you have spoken about starting just your journey to learn Braille. So do you think that all lecturers ought to learn Braille?
No, I don't think that's necessary. I'm going to jump down to a lovely picture. So I think it's more important to be willing to understand what helps a learner to learn. Some things that could be quite abstract, especially in maths, sometimes in, she's learning quantum and continuous dynamics. I can't even
Wow.
say it. I can't even say it. The equations are like literally 2 foot long when by the time you've kind of written it out. Never mind in normal laid out maths, never mind in Braille. In Braille
Yeah.
it's about 4 foot long. So there are quite abstract things, and some things are quite hard in 3 dimensions as well. But where the tutors are able to make tactiles to get simple concepts across, they do. I love our lectures. Look at this, on the screen, we've got this lovely tactile made by a lecturer. I think they rated their children's art and craft box. So you've got this shiny paper to create the axes, so you can feel it on the paper. You've got string to create this graph, the cycle on the page, and then you've got stars in cardboard stars, and then pom-poms because those points are different, and the lecturer wanted to differentiate them. Then he found a number 1 and stuck it on the top. So he doesn't know Braille, but he's done the best thing he could possibly do to help the student have a resource while he's talking about it in the lecture. There are about 9 of these things, and it's just wonderful. So there's no Braille on it at all, but the student could label them up afterwards, right? Having understood what the picture 1 was about. So they could add their own Braille labels, or they can use a thing called a pen friend, stick a label on, and then record a little bit of audio about it. And equally, a lecturer can always co-create with a student. So you can make a start and then sit with a student, explain it to them, and then help them with kind of getting the labels in there. So co-creation is always the recommended thing to do, really.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm gonna give Laura a little break now and chip in with some more questions. It's great to see some great questions and discussions happening in the chat as well. We'll come back to those after this. I think the tactile diagram aspect of all this is really, really interesting. Um, and if, Braille is a mystery to people, sometimes tactile graphics can seem even more so. But I love the emphasis on working with the student and really discovering what works for them. Something that people might not know, but you do now, is that Lillian writes lots of blogs about creating tactile graphics for VI students. And I wonder if you'd like to, I don't elaborate a little bit on that, Lillian, in terms of what your key tips in this area, or things, resources you'd like to direct people to in terms of getting started with tactile materials.
Yeah, I think me writing blog posts about what I'm attempting is as much to remind me of my rationale, as well as reminder to my future self, don't do it this way, do it that way. And when I go to like the Perkins School for the Blind in America, they encourage a lot of their TVIs, teachers of vision impaired, to write in a lot of detail about what they're doing and how they're planning their work. And I've modeled that as much as I can. It's like I'm making these mistakes so that other people don't have to, if that makes sense. So for instance, like when you're trying to recreate something that's a box plot, which is quite complex, and of course, it's been squished together by the lecturer on an A4 sheet of paper. Well, you've got no luxury of that with tactiles. You've got to expand it out so that you've got enough space for the braille and for a finger to kind of discern differences between lines and all this stuff. So I've often had to expand things out to A3 in a sense. So for me, writing these blog posts is like making sure I capture that learning, because I can forget from one day to the next what I've done. Capturing examples of things so other people can be pre-warned about, like these labels are going to pop off if you don't double-sided stick them, because they do, these RNIB labels. Sorry, it's not RNIB, it's just the Kaizen, Raizan label, whatever they're called. So they're not very good sticking plastic to plastic. So I think I write these blog posts partly because it's a learning journey that other people could maybe learn from. And as well, I guess it helps me to kind of share with people like, okay, it's the start of term. What are the things you really, really need to know? Just read this through and see if you can get started. And that's how the lecturer came to create that lovely crafted graph thing. And then I just want to say, I kind of want to finish this bit by sharing our students. Let me think. Well, where was the? I think I'll just go right to the end of this particular blog post. I just want to share the creativity of our students. Elizabeth was saying, what do HE students need to know? If you can teach them all the HE maths before they come, that would be great. Or even Greek symbols. But anyway, my Braille student, I take my bullet journal for granted, or I like to plan visually on a board. And she's using her Braille labeler, her slate, to punch out reminders for herself. So this is 7 days. And she's got a cork board and she's got 7 days, and it gives her daily routine, kind of like time boxed: morning routine, lunch, afternoon routine, evening. She's got flat pins because they're labels that she doesn't change. And then she's got push pins because she can take those off and replace them with another routine. So you can't do this as easily in a digital form and still be able to access it almost instantly. So tactiles really, really have their place as a supporting tool for anybody who doesn't have vision, really. So I think, yeah, this is just one example of how creative someone can be when they need to be, and it's just really, really inspiring. So yeah, I will share my blog site and blog post in the chat, but I'll stop sharing screen now.
That's great, thanks. It's some really great creative examples there. And you're using, you've done a lot of hands-on things. You do have, you were mentioning about embossers earlier, and you do have an embosser now. Are there any extra sort of challenges with or does it make life a lot easier, or does it just introduce some new challenges to address when you get your mitts on an embosser?
I certainly think it's helped to have learned all the tips and tricks doing it manually first, because it reminds me to leave enough space for Braille text around the diagram. So it makes me think in advance, that's not going to fit on A4. I'm going to have to think about it and break it into two. It saves me from running around the house like a mad woman trying to find different textures to create for different parts of a pie chart. I can use different patterns on the embosser, or even just single line, 2 lines, 3 lines, and I was discussing it with the student before, and it's like there are lots of things we can be creative in different ways. They don't look as fun because obviously an embossed white sheet is an embossed white sheet. But we've bought the spot dot embosser because that allows us to print, and then the embossing goes with the paper so that any sighted helpers can see what they're looking at. If they've got a question, they can go, oh yeah, that is such and such. So it's a really nice blend of both a tool for sighted and for someone who needs tactiles.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing. And it's great as well. You've got a lovely resource there for people to refer back to. It saves us having to basically say we're going to blog and then might not do it, which is something we're terrible for with these things. So thanks so much for sharing that. Absolutely fantastic, Lillian. And both now we've got some time. This is great. We've got some questions, and Elizabeth has answered some questions in the chat, but we will just pick through and pick out some to put to both of you and to share as well with the collective experiences in the Zoom room as well. And when I wanted to go just just rewind back a bit, just I think it's just before you started, Lillian, and about a participant saying, she was saying, I'm not quite sure how to word this right, but do Braille users use their devices to navigate on the web? So can they use them with the internet, and what do we need to think about in regards to our websites and e-learning for people who are using dynamic Braille displays? I don't know, Elizabeth, if you want to kick off.
Yeah, so it's a really good point. So really all websites need to be accessible, and sometimes we can't do anything about it because it's whoever has created that website. And I've got to say, despite the fact that I work in the inclusive education programme in Edinburgh, there are parts of our website, no, not so much our website, but the student facing things, for example, Turnitin and getting feedback for assignments and blue bubble comments is not accessible. So we have to do it another way. But whenever anybody says, I'm about to change, or we're going to tell you about the changes that we've made, I am the annoying person in the room that goes, is it accessible? For example, our library is great but very inaccessible because it takes you to pages with journal articles, and where the download button is for that article is never in the same place, depending on which publisher has published that article. I see that somebody's nodding. Adam, thank you very much. Yeah, so it's really, really challenging. So be that annoying person, I would say, in the room. It all depends how websites have been coded, whether they've got titles, whether they've got headings, links, and so on. And if that's not been done when they've been created, unfortunately, that student who's using a Braille display, or a laptop rather, with a Braille display, is on hiding to nothing, unfortunately.
Yep, accessibility is the key here. As with all things, really, it kind of comes back to that. So thanks. Yeah, I think that's the thing with these. I think it's hard to imagine, but the little kind of Braille notes and things, they are essentially kind of computers, but just without a screen, and they can kind of do everything. But obviously they can only do everything if the content and the design is accessible in the first place. You've answered some of the questions, just in case anybody can't access the chat or whatever. There was very good question about whether Braille is the same everywhere in the world. And Elizabeth has responded that it is universal in English-speaking countries. We're all using UEB, which when that changed over, it was a while ago, wasn't it? UEB was introduced, I think, to maybe bring together some English-speaking countries were using slightly different annotations and things. But just like anything else, it's different languages will use different Braille formats. Let's have a look down here. Oh yeah, and there's quite a bit of chat as well about, especially particularly some of the functionality in iPhones using VoiceOver, and a few people contributing that you can use the iPhone screen as a Braille input and check what you've typed there. So that's a good shout out to the iPhone for an interesting thing.
Ellie, can I just add something about that?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it's great, you know, accessibility is absolutely wonderful. I think, and I really take my hat off to Lillian, because what she's doing is absolutely incredible, and it's, you know, it's really challenging. Maths is challenging, even for those of us who know the Braille code, and because of that crossover between many of the characters that are used in literary Braille are also used in maths Braille to represent something completely different. I just wanted to make the point that you just can't rely on that for maths, because, you know, as your wonderful examples with Google, you know, it's not always accurate. So I just wanted to say that just as a little word of caution as well.
Yeah. Well, actually, shout out as well to Lillian and colleagues, I think some of whom are on this call as well, for the maths accessibility community, which kind of exploded out of this kind of community. And you've got we can pop the link in as well. You've got a great website because I think it's such a sort of special case use of Braille. And the best way to address this is by getting people together. So I don't know if you want to say a little bit about that, Lillian, and let people know that it exists.
Yeah.
Already.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, so the Jisc Accessible Maths Working Group, I mean, it was one of quite a few kind of groups that Jisc formed around the accessibility community. But those of us who are doing the maths thing or scratching our head about the maths thing have lasted the longest, I think. I like to think. Laura's confirming that. And it's evolved. It's had like Fiona was the first chair. I did some chairing, and now I've passed it on to Cordelia, who is much better at doing this than me, because one, she does maths. I don't. I've got a graphic design degree, so I don't do maths or Braille, but look where I am now. And it's a wonderful community, lots of HE people coming together going, how do we solve this? What can we do to make it better, easier? And to start with, it's all about, if someone needs their maths in a different format, how quickly can you turn it into something more usable for them? So number one, it's best if the maths is accessible from the ground up, which means usually producing it as a web page. However, the student might then want to note take, which is not easy to do on a web page. So then they might ask, can I have it in like a Word document, an RTF document, in single line maths? And then you're like, I type in LaTeX and I output to PDF. What do you mean? So it's trying to form those bridges between what lecturers do and what students need. That's what we're about. And we try and do the technical things. And Matt's been brilliant. Matt's been trying to help us figure out, is there an easy in between, you know, because a lot of the things require us to use consoles, you know, code to run software that we've never used before. It literally is Greek to us, trying to help. So yeah, but it's a good community. Please come along and join. The next meeting's on the 10th of October. So yeah, everyone's welcome.
It's a great example as well of, you know, really large community of people spinning out and doing a really kind of deep dive on a particular topic. And there's nothing, you know, to stop folks from if there's other areas. You know, we absolutely love to see that, and give it our full support. So that's fab. So we've just got about 5 minutes left. So we can just looking for the. Oh, I think Steph is in the chat referring, I think, back to the question when we were talking about using Braille display devices on the web. And Steph's asking, do we think the standard website things, so accessibility kind of standards that work for screen readers, work for Braille displays? And I think this possibly links to, I think, Elizabeth, you were saying earlier that Braille displays are using a screen reader to drive them.
That's
So
right.
can we make the logical conclusion that it probably is?
Yeah.
If
So
something
if
works with a screen reader, it'll work with a Braille display, or is that?
Yeah. So if your website, because you're going to move through your website using your keyboard, and then what's going to appear on your screen is going to appear on your Braille display. So if you're jumping by headings or by links, then it should appear on your Braille display. So it should be it should appear there. Can I just say, somebody in the chat put in Lego Braille bricks. And to which my response was, oh, controversial. We have done some research with Lego on the Braille bricks, obviously with children and young people. We haven't actually published on it yet, but Lego Braille bricks divide the Braille community. You're either a big fan or you're not. I like them because anything that promotes Braille is good. But are they Braille? Well, that's another question and longer. You know, we've got 3 minutes left. Many people, including myself, don't think they are Braille because they're not the incorrect size. But they're great for, you know, making people aware that Braille exists and that Braille is a code that people use to read with. So I think we've got some perhaps limited use, certainly around promotion, maybe around a little bit on chemistry, how you could do a bit of bonds with it or something like that. Chemistry is, again, not a subject that's often done by learners who've got significant visual impairment. But yeah, that's kind of a very potted bit of history of Lego Braille bricks.
Yeah, interesting. Good.
I love a bit of controversy.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was actually thinking, even for parents, it could be quite a good awareness raising thing of just kind of getting to know, you know, the kind of format and the basic alphabet and things. So that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Lillian saying good for me. I suppose it's maybe analogous to when people play, you know, kids play with big, you know, chunky sort of letters or whatever with their first ABC or something. But or maybe it's not analogous. I'm being
No, it's absolutely not. No. Speak to any blind person and they'll tell you, no, we don't do large print Braille.
Yeah, I know that. But I just think of toddlers kind of messing about with things. Okay, sorry. Okay, it's not the same at all. Okay, so that's fab. I think we've covered absolutely loads there. Yeah, and Edward's popped in a little form for you guys at the end. Or Matthew's put in as well a link to the some of his content there. So grab that link before you go. But just for 29 minutes there. So well done to our speakers for keeping to time very well and for all your great contributions and questions and things. Just check. Oh yes, there's still questions going on about
I wanted to
labels and things.
I wanted to just pick up Steph's question. The Braille display only has 32 characters and screen readers are picking up, you know, alt text or descriptions that are much longer. You can always jump ahead, you know, it's like on a keyboard, if you want to jump from sentence, word to word, or sentence to sentence, or paragraph to paragraph, they're not passively letting the text wash over them. They can navigate past things and go to the next, you know, structured bit. So yeah, people can appreciate alt text when they want it and leave it if they don't like it.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. Gosh, we've covered incredible breadth of topics here today. So thanks everybody, and we'll be back
5th of
Right.
November.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for our next session. So keep an eye on the mailing lists and all the usual community spaces, LinkedIn and things for the next topic. But also, you know, always let us know as well the kinds of things you'd like to hear about. Thanks a lot for coming along.
Thank you.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was going to stop the
Yes.
recording.